Greetings and welcome back to the Inheritance of Dust, where we explore the stories of lives irrevocably altered within the walls of the world's most beautiful homes. It is a pleasure to have you in our company once again. Before we unlatch the gates, I want to express my sincere gratitude to our wonderful community. Your thoughtful comments on our last story were truly exceptional. If you are new here, and you are captivated by narratives of passion, obsession, and the dark secrets that can fester behind the most polished facades, you have found your sanctuary. Please, take a moment. As always, we must preface our story with a disclaimer. The following account is a work of fiction. The names, characters, estates, and incidents portrayed are entirely the products of the imagination. Any resemblance to actual events or persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The bond between a mistress and her maid is one of the most intimate and complex in any household. It is a relationship built on trust, proximity, and a delicate, unspoken power dynamic. But what happens when that trust is a lie? What happens when admiration curdles into a deadly obsession? Today, we tell the story of a beautiful maid, a kind mistress, and a wealthy master, and the chilling plot that was born in the silent, watchful corridors of a grand estatia plot to turn a position of service into one of absolute power. Ashworth Manor was a world unto itself. It was a symphony of old money and impeccable taste, a sprawling Georgian estate nestled in acres of rolling countryside that seemed to have been painted by Constable. The air there was different, cleaner, quieter, rarefied. The sunlight that streamed through the tall, mullioned windows seemed to know its place, illuminating the perfectly polished mahogany and the priceless works of art with a deferential glow. It was a house that didn't just contain beauty, it curated it. The mistress of this curated world was Eleanora Ashworth. She was a woman who seemed to have been crafted from the same fine, delicate material as the porcelain in her display cabinets. She was beautiful in an ethereal, almost fragile way, with pale blonde hair, kind, cornflower blue eyes, and a gentleness of spirit that permeated every room she entered. She moved through her perfect life with a quiet grace, her days a gentle rhythm of managing the household staff, tending to her prized orchids in the conservatory, and hosting the occasional exquisitely tasteful charity luncheon. She loved her husband, Alistair, with a deep, serene, and uncomplicated devotion. Alistair Ashworth was the master of the manor, though he often felt more like its busiest guest. He was a titan of international finance, a handsome, powerful man whose life was a whirlwind of board meetings in London, tense negotiations in Hong Kong, and transatlantic flights. He was brilliant, driven, and perpetually distracted by the immense weight of his empire. He loved Eleanora deeply, seeing her as his sanctuary, the calm, beautiful anchor in his chaotic world. He was a good man, a kind man, but his attention was a commodity in short supply, a high-powered beam that was usually focused on a world far beyond the stone walls of his own home. And then there was Anna Morley. Anna was the invisible woman. She was the new lady's maid, hired to assist Eleanora, to care for her wardrobe, to draw her baths, to be the silent, efficient engine that kept the personal world of the mistress running with flawless precision. She was beautiful, but in a way that was easy to overlook. She had dark, lustrous hair, always pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun, pale, luminous skin, and large, dark, watchful eyes. Her beauty was in her stillness, in her quiet, almost unnerving self-possession. She moved through the grand house with a ghost-like silence, her dark uniform a smudge of shadow against the bright, airy decor. Anna's past was a world away from the sun-drenched serenity of Ashworth Manor. She had grown up in the gray, cramped confines of a foster care system that had taught her two fundamental lessons: that the world was divided into the powerful and the powerless, and that the only way to survive was to become an expert observer. She had learned to read the subtle shifts in a person's mood, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to make herself so useful and so unobtrusive that she became a necessary, invisible part of the furniture. When she first arrived at Ashworth Manor, she was simply grateful for the position. The work was easy, the pay was generous, and the environment was, for the first time in her life, beautiful. But gratitude is a pale, fleeting emotion. In its place, something else began to grow, something dark and complex and hungry. It started as a form of worship. She would watch Eleonora, this creature of light and effortless privilege, with a kind of obsessive awe. She studied her walk, the soft cadence of her voice, the way she arranged flowers, the way she wore her pearls. But admiration, in a heart as starved as Anna's, soon curdled into a corrosive envy. She saw Eleonora's life not as something to be respected, but as something to be coveted. The beautiful clothes she laid out each morning, the delicate jewelry she polished, the luxurious, silk-lined world she maintained at it all began to feel, in a strange, twisted way, as though it should be hers. The true focus of her obsession, however, was not Eleonora. It was Alistair. She saw him only in fleeting moments, when he was home between trips. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of masculine energy and power that was utterly intoxicating to a woman who had spent her life being powerless. He was always kind to her, but in a distant, almost unconscious way. He would offer a brief, polite smile if he passed her in the hall. He would say, "Thank you, Anna," if she brought him a glass of water. He looked at her, but he did not see her. He saw only a uniform, a function, a part of the household machinery. But in Anna's starved imagination, these small, meaningless courtesies were transformed into something more. A brief smile was a secret acknowledgement. A polite thank you was a sign of a special, unspoken connection. She began to construct an elaborate, delusional fantasy. She told herself that Alistair was trapped in a passionless marriage with the fragile, childlike Eleonora. He needed a real woman, a strong woman, someone with a fire and an intelligence that matched his own. He needed her. She became a student of him. When she cleaned his study, she would memorize the titles of his books. She would read the financial papers he left behind, trying to understand his world. She would touch his clothes as she took them to the laundry, the scent of his cologne on the fabric a physical, intimate connection. She saw herself not as the maid, but as the true, secret mistress of the house, the one who understood its master in a way his own wife never could. She was not just serving him. She was preparing for the day she would take her rightful place by his side. Eleonora, in her sweet, naive kindness, unwittingly fed the delusion. She saw Anna not just as a servant, but as a confidant. She was lonely in the vast, quiet house, and Anna's silent, attentive presence was a comfort. She would talk to Anna as she dressed, sharing small, inconsequential details of her life. "Alistair is in Singapore this week," she would sigh, a note of melancholy in her voice. "He works so terribly hard. I worry he'll burn himself out." Anna would listen, her expression one of perfect, sympathetic concern, while inside, her heart would beat with a triumphant, proprietary thrill. She doesn't appreciate him, Anna would think. She sees his strength as a weakness. I would celebrate it. I would be his partner, not his porcelain doll. The key, the weapon, the very mechanism of the chilling plot that was beginning to form in the dark corners of Anna's mind, was also a gift from Eleonora. One afternoon, Eleonora had a slight dizzy spell in the garden. Anna had rushed to her side, helping her back to her rooms. As she was fetching a glass of water, Eleonora had explained. "It's just one of my silly allergies, Anna," she had said with a weak, apologetic smile. "It's quite rare and quite severe. It's the pollen from a specific flower, the stargazer lily. Beautiful, but for me, quite deadly. Even a small amount in the air can make it difficult for me to breathe. A large exposure. Well, my doctor says it could trigger a fatal anaphylactic shock." She had shown Anna the 2 EpiPens she kept in her bedside table. "If I'm ever having a severe reaction, you must use one of these on me immediately, and then call an ambulance." It's terribly dramatic, I know. Alistair insists that all the household staff are aware. Anna had listened, her face a mask of concern, her mind a whirring, cold machine. She had stored the information away, filing it in the dark, meticulously organized cabinet of her obsession. A beautiful flower, a deadly allergy, a secret vulnerability. It was a detail of perfect, tragic elegance. The catalyst that turned Anna's passive, delusional fantasy into an active, murderous plot was a moment of profound, unintended cruelty. Alistair had been home for a rare, full week. One evening, Anna had stayed late, helping the cook prepare for a small, intimate dinner party the Ashworths were hosting. As she was leaving, her path from the servants' quarters crossed the main terrace. Through the large French doors, she could see the party in full swing. Alistair and Eleonora were dancing. He was holding his wife in his arms, his head bent towards hers, and he was laughing, a deep, genuine, unguarded laugh of pure joy. He looked at Eleonora with an expression of such profound, absolute love that it was a physical blow to Anna. It was a look he had never, and would never, direct at her. In that single, devastating moment, Anna's entire fantasy world shattered. The narrative she had so carefully constructed off a trapped, unhappy husband and a fragile, inadequate wife was revealed for what it was. A pathetic, self-serving lie. He was not waiting for her. He did not need her. He loved his wife. The love she had felt for Alistair, a twisted, possessive, imaginary love, did not die. It mutated. It curdled into a rage so potent, so absolute, that it demanded an outlet. Her shame and humiliation turned outwards, focusing with a laser-like intensity on the one person she could blame: Eleonora. It was Eleonora's fault. She was the obstacle. She was the one standing in the way of Anna's destiny. She did not deserve that love, that life, that man. Anna, in her quiet strength, in her deep, obsessive understanding of Alistair, was the more deserving one. The world was simply wrong, and it was up to her to correct it. She walked back to her small, plain room in the servants' wing, her posture as straight and as rigid as ever. But her dark, watchful eyes held a new, terrifying light. The invisible woman had found her purpose. She was no longer just an observer. She was a predator. And she had just seen her path to the heart of the manor. It was a path that would have to be cleared. She would have to remove the beautiful, fragile, and now deeply hated mistress of Ashworth Manor. The decision to murder Eleonora Ashworth was not made in a fit of passion. It was a cold, logical conclusion, a problem to be solved with the same meticulous, dispassionate efficiency Anna applied to polishing silver or removing a wine stain from a silk blouse. Her fantasy had been shattered by the brutal truth of Alistair's love for his wife, but Anna, in her profound delusion, did not discard the fantasy. She simply amended the plot. The story was not over. It had merely encountered an obstacle that needed to be permanently removed. If Alistair could not see that Anna was his true soulmate, it was only because Eleonora was in the way. Once she was gone, he would be free to recognize the truth. His grief would be a vast, empty space that only she, in her quiet strength and intimate knowledge of his world, could fill. Her mind, honed by a lifetime of observation and silent calculation, became a laboratory for the perfect murder. It had to be untraceable. It had to be tragic. It had to look like a terrible, unavoidable accident. Eleonora herself had provided the method. The stargazer lily. It was a weapon of exquisite, poetic cruelty to kill a woman with a thing of beauty. The first phase of her plan was research. In the late hours of the night, in the privacy of her small, Spartan room, she used the slow, shared Wi-Fi of the servants' quarters to become an expert in anaphylaxis. She learned about the cascading effects of a severe allergic reaction, the rapid swelling of the airways, the catastrophic drop in blood pressure, the swift, merciless march towards cardiac arrest. She learned that the potency of the pollen could be magnified in an enclosed space, and that the onset of symptoms could be accelerated by a heightened emotional state or physical exertion. She was not just planning a murder. She was choreographing a medical event. The second and most critical phase was acquiring the weapon. She could not simply purchase a bouquet of stargazer lilies from a local florist. It would be a loose thread, a clue that could unravel everything. She needed a source that was untraceable, anonymous. Her solution was a testament to her cold, calculating foresight. She found a specialty bulb wholesaler online, a company that shipped internationally. Using a prepaid credit card she had purchased with cash in a distant town and creating a fake email address at a public library, she ordered a box of 24 premium stargazer lily bulbs. She had them shipped not to the manor, but to a hold-for-collection depot in a small village 20 miles away, under a false name. On her day off, she took a series of buses to the village, collected the anonymous brown box, and returned to the manor. She found the perfect place to cultivate her poison. A small, forgotten, and perpetually overgrown corner of the vast kitchen gardens, hidden behind a crumbling stone wall and choked with weeds. It was a part of the estate the head gardener, a man nearing retirement, rarely bothered with. There, in secret, Anna planted her bulbs. She tended to her hidden garden with a chilling, maternal care, watering the shoots, protecting them from pests. As the strong, green stalks grew and the buds began to swell, she felt a sense of profound, terrible power. She was not just growing flowers. She was cultivating a death sentence. While her deadly garden grew, she laid the rest of the groundwork. She needed to neutralize Eleonora's only defense, the EpiPens. One afternoon, while Eleonora was in the conservatory, Anna let herself into the master bedroom. With hands that were as steady as a surgeon's, she took the 2 EpiPens from the bedside table. She knew from her research that they were single-use devices. She took them to the privacy of her own bathroom and, pressing them into a thick, folded towel to muffle the sound and absorb the liquid, she discharged them both. She then carefully placed the useless, empty devices back into their original boxes and returned them to the bedside table. They looked perfect, untouched, a life-saving illusion. The final piece of her plan was timing. She needed to strike when Alistair was away, to ensure he would not be there to intervene. She consulted Eleonora's social calendar and Alistair's travel itinerary, which she had access to as part of her duties. She found the perfect window. A 4-day period in late summer when Alistair would be in New York for a series of critical meetings, and Eleonora, who had been suffering from a series of minor stress headaches, had cleared her schedule for a few days of quiet rest. The day arrived. It was a warm, still, late August afternoon. The stargazer lilies in Anna's secret garden were in full, glorious, and catastrophically potent bloom. Their scent was a heady, sweet perfume that clung to the air. That morning, after Alistair had left for the airport, Anna went to her garden with a pair of shears. She cut every single stem, amassing a bouquet of breathtaking, lethal beauty. She knew that Eleonora planned to spend the afternoon resting in her private sitting room, a small, beautifully appointed space adjacent to the master bedroom, a room with windows that were kept closed against the summer heat. This was to be the killing jar. Anna arranged the lilies in a large, heavy crystal vase. It was an extravagant, almost overwhelming display of floral beauty. She then initiated the final act of her chilling play. She went to Eleonora, who was reading in the conservatory, her face a mask of polite, professional concern. "Ma'am," Anna began, her voice soft, "a delivery has just arrived for you. A gift, I believe. It is quite stunning." The deliverman said there was no card, that it was meant to be a surprise. "A surprise?" Eleonora said, her curiosity piqued. "How lovely. From whom, I wonder?" "I've taken the liberty of placing it in your sitting room, ma'am," Anna said. "It will get the best light there." An hour later, as Eleonora made her way upstairs for her afternoon rest, the trap was set. Anna watched from the far end of the long hallway as her mistress opened the door to the sitting room and paused. Anna could imagine the scene. Eleonora's initial gasp of pleasure at the sight of the magnificent, anonymous gift, followed by the first, dawning flicker of recognition, the first subtle tickle of the deadly pollen in the back of her throat. The door closed and the countdown began. Anna went to the kitchen and put on a kettle for tea, her movements calm and measured. She was establishing her alibi, her reason for being in that part of the house. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. The silence from upstairs was absolute. And then she heard it. A faint, muffled cough. It was followed by a soft thud, as if a book had been dropped. Then, a more distinct, scraping sound, the sound of a chair being pushed back violently. Anna's heart began to pound. not with fear, but with a cold, exhilarating thrill. She took the tea tray and started up the grand staircase, her steps unhurried, her expression one of placid duty. As she reached the top, she heard a new sound, a faint, desperate, wheezing gasp from behind the sitting-room door. She knocked softly. "Ma'am? Your afternoon tea." There was no reply, only another choked, gasping sound. "Ma'am," Anna said again, injecting a note of concern into her voice. "Are you all right?" She waited a moment longer, for the benefit of any unseen audience, before turning the handle and pushing the door open. The scene inside was one of premeditated horror. The air in the room was thick, almost viscous, with the sweet, cloying scent of the lilies. Eleonora was on the floor, clawing at her throat, her face a swollen, purplish mask, her beautiful blue eyes wide with a terror and a desperate, pleading question. She was trying to crawl towards the bedroom, towards the useless EpiPens that she believed would save her. "Oh my God!" Anna cried out, her voice a perfect simulation of shock and panic. She rushed to Eleonora's side, placing the tea tray on a nearby table. "Ma'am, what is it? What's wrong?" "The lilies," Eleonora choked out, her voice a barely audible rasp. "Pen, bedside, table, the EpiPen, of course," Anna exclaimed. She ran into the bedroom, her mind a cold, clear void of calculation. She fumbled with the box on the bedside table, her movements deliberately clumsy, wasting precious, fatal seconds. She came running back with the useless device. She knelt beside Eleonora, her face a mask of desperate concentration. She mimicked the procedure Eleonora had once shown her, pressing the empty injector into her mistress's thigh. "It's not working," she cried, her voice rising in a theatrical hysteria. "Oh God, it's not working." She watched, her face inches from Eleonora's, as the last, faint spark of life faded from her eyes. She watched as the desperate, rasping breaths ceased. She watched until she was absolutely, completely sure that her mistress was dead. Only then did she run from the room, her screams echoing through the silent, cavernous halls of Ashworth Manor. "Help! Somebody help! The mistress! She can't breathe! Please, somebody help!" She ran down the stairs and fumbled with the telephone in the hall, her hands shaking with a perfectly feigned terror. She dialed for an ambulance, her voice a hysterical, broken mess. When the paramedics and the police arrived, they found a scene of profound, inexplicable tragedy. They found a beautiful, devoted maid, weeping uncontrollably, desperately trying to explain what had happened. They found a room filled with a catastrophically large bouquet of stargazer lilies. And they found the body of Eleonora Ashworth, the two discharged, but tragically ineffective, EpiPens lying on the floor beside her. The conclusion was swift and heartbreakingly obvious. Terrible, tragic accident. A secret admirer, unaware of her deadly allergy, had sent a fatal gift. The house's medical equipment had, for some inexplicable reason, malfunctioned. It was a perfect one-in-a-million storm of misfortune. Anna Morley, the invisible woman, the devoted maid who had fought so heroically to save her mistress, was the last person anyone would ever suspect. She had committed the perfect murder. And now all she had to do was wait for the master of the house to return home. His heart broken, his world shattered, ready to be comforted and claimed. Alistair Ashworth returned from New York not to a sanctuary, but to a tomb. The news of his wife's death, delivered in a cold, official phone call that had severed his world in two, had been an impossible, abstract horror. But walking back into the silent, grief-stricken halls of Ashworth Manor made it brutally, tangibly real. The house, which had always been a symphony of light and life orchestrated by Eleonora, was now muted, its colors dimmed, its air heavy with the suffocating weight of her absence. He found Anna in the main hall, a still, dark figure in the cavernous space. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from what appeared to be days of weeping. She played her part to perfection. She was the picture of a loyal, heartbroken servant, devastated by the loss of the mistress she had so dutifully served. She recounted the story of that terrible afternoon, her voice a low, trembling whisper, her narrative punctuated by perfectly timed, choked-back sobs. She omitted no detail of her heroic efforts, from her discovery of Eleonora to the frantic, failed attempts with the EpiPens. Alistair, a man hollowed out by a grief so profound it was a physical agony, listened in a fog of disbelief. He was not a detective. He was a husband whose world had just ended. He saw in Anna not a suspect, but a fellow mourner, a living link to his wife's final, terrifying moments. In the chaotic, disorienting aftermath of the tragedy, her quiet, unwavering competence was a strange, unexpected comfort. While he was drowning in a sea of funeral arrangements and sympathetic relatives, Anna was the one who kept the household running. She was the one who knew which tea his mother-in-law preferred, the one who intercepted the endless, intrusive phone calls, the one who made sure he remembered to eat. She became, in a matter of days, indispensable. The official investigation was brief and concluded exactly as Anna had planned. The coroner's report was unequivocal. Death by anaphylactic shock, caused by acute exposure to a known allergen. The source of the lilies was a mystery, a tragic, anonymous mistake. The malfunctioning EpiPens were noted as a catastrophic equipment failure, prompting a safety recall from the manufacturer. It was a closed case, a tragedy, end of story. And so, Anna's long, patient game began. She did not rush. She did not push. She simply was. She was a constant, silent presence in Alistair's life, a bedrock of stability in his crumbling world. She became the keeper of his routines, the curator of his grief. She learned the precise, intricate rhythms of his sorrow. When he needed solitude, when he needed a quiet word of comfort, when he needed a stiff glass of whiskey without having to ask for it. Months passed. The raw, open wound of Alistair's grief slowly began to scar over, leaving a dull, permanent ache. He began to notice Anna, truly notice her. For the first time, he saw not a uniform but a woman. He saw her quiet strength, her unwavering loyalty, her profound, seemingly endless capacity for empathy. He began to talk to her, not as a master to a servant, but as one lonely soul to another. He would find himself in the library late at night, and she would appear with a tray of tea and they would talk. He would speak of Eleonora, of his guilt for having been away, for not being there to protect her. Anna would listen, her dark eyes full of a deep, compassionate sorrow, offering a quiet, comforting word here and there. She was a master manipulator, playing on his grief, his guilt, his profound loneliness, weaving a new web around him, this one not of fantasy, but of carefully constructed emotional dependency. Slowly, subtly, she began to erase Eleonora from the house. A photograph on the mantelpiece would be replaced by a vase of simple, elegant flowers, never lilies. A particular perfume that Eleonora had favored would quietly disappear from the rooms. She did it so gradually, with such gentle, plausible explanations. The frame was dusty, sir. The scent seemed to be making the air heavy, that Alistair never even noticed the systematic dismantling of his wife's memory. He only noticed that the house was, in some indefinable way, becoming less painful to exist in. The first person to sense the discordant note in this sad, quiet symphony was Beatrice, Eleonora's younger sister. Beatrice was a sharp, pragmatic woman who had none of her sister's ethereal gentleness. She had always found Ashworth Manor a bit cold, a bit too perfect, and she had never fully trusted Anna's quiet, watchful demeanor. During a visit 6 months after the funeral, Beatrice was struck by the change in the household. It was not just the absence of her sister, it was the presence of the maid. Anna was no longer an invisible servant. She was the de facto mistress of the house. She seemed to anticipate Alistair's needs. She spoke with a quiet authority to the other staff. She moved with an air of proprietary ownership that Beatrice found deeply unsettling. The breaking point came when Beatrice noticed that her sister's prized orchid collection in the conservatory was gone, replaced by a display of stark, minimalist succulents. When she questioned Anna, The maid's answer was smooth and reasonable. They required so much care, ma'am. I thought it best to replace them with something less demanding, to simplify things for the master. Beatrice looked at Anna, at her calm, placid face, and she saw, with a sudden, chilling clarity, not a servant, but a usurper. The idea that began to form in her mind was monstrous, unthinkable, and yet, it refused to be dismissed. She started asking questions. She spoke to the gardener, to the cook, to other members of the staff. She learned of Anna's almost obsessive devotion, her strange, solitary nature. And she learned that no one, not a single person on the estate, had ever seen a delivery truck or a florist arrive on the day of Eleanora's death. Beatrice took her suspicions to the police. They were dismissive. The case was closed. It was a tragic accident. The grief-stricken sister was simply looking for someone to blame. Undeterred, Beatrice hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Robert Finch. Finch was a patient, methodical man, a bloodhound for the cold, hard scent of facts. Finch started where the police had left off. He focused on the two central mysteries, the source of the flowers and the malfunctioning EpiPens. The idea of a secret, anonymous admirer had never sat right with him. It was too cinematic. He began a painstaking, laborious search of online floral and botanical wholesalers, cross-referencing their shipping records for any anonymous deliveries to the area around Ashworth Manor in the weeks leading up to the death. Took him a month, but he found it. A box of premium stargazer lily bulbs, ordered with a prepaid card, shipped to a collection depot in a small village, and signed for under a false, female name. The signature was a simple, generic scrawl. But Finch also obtained the depot security camera footage from that day. The image was grainy, taken from a bad angle, but it was clear enough. The woman who collected the box, dressed in a plain, inconspicuous coat and a headscarf, had the same height, the same slender build, and the same quiet, deliberate way of moving as Anna Morley. It was the crack in the facade. With this new evidence, Finch convinced the police to discreetly reopen the investigation. They obtained a warrant to search the servants' quarters at Ashworth Manor. In Anna's room, hidden at the bottom of her closet, they found a small, well-tended gardening trowel and a pair of gloves. A forensic analysis of the soil residue on the trowel found traces of the unique soil composition from the forgotten corner of the kitchen gardens. When the investigators went to that spot, they found the freshly turned earth and the severed, wilting stems of 24 stargazer lilies. The final, damning piece came from a deep dive into Anna's limited digital footprint. On the public